So I'm here to welcome our first keynote speaker for the day. It's my pleasure to welcome Neal Mayerson, who is the founder of the VIA Institute on Character, and he founded this with Marty Seligman. He's the president of the Mayerson Foundation, a charitable foundation and the VIA Institute on Character advances the science and practice of character strength. He's also the president of the Mayerson Academy, which was established 25 years ago, and it focuses on the professional development of K through 12 educators. He's also the president of the Mayerson Company. It's a real estate development, management, and investment company. He's a social and business entrepreneur, and he's a licensed clinical psychologist. So it's my pleasure to welcome you. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Deborah. Welcome, everybody. Good morning. It's a big turnout for Saturday morning. They warned me that it may start, that all of you might not get up so early and they might trickle in, but you're all bright and early. As you just heard, I've been involved in working with educators for 25 years. And so it's really a privilege for me to be here with you today, and because all of you do such important and high mission work. So if you don't mind, why don't we just start with giving yourself an applaud for everything you do. So I'm going to be talking to you about the work I've been I've been involved in over the last 15 years or so in the world of character science, advancing the science and the practice of character. People have asked me, why have I spent so much time, energy, and money on this over the years? And I've reflected on that, and there are a number of reflection points that come to mind. First, I spent many years as a psychotherapist, sitting in offices with people hour after hour, year after year, working with them on their life problems. And what became apparent to me is that I wasn't so much confronting mental illness. What I was confronting more so, it seemed, were tangled lives that had become tangled by what I think is the following process. You see, from the moment we are born, we immediately begin to confront the expectations that others have of us. And from that point forward, our life unfolds in a kind of dynamic tension between the unfolding of who we really are, our true self and our natural inclinations, and meeting the requirements that others have of us for their affection and their love and their respect, admiration, belonging, etc. And for too many of us, sometimes there's a big gap between our natural unfolding and the requirements that people are making of us for their admiration and appreciation. And when that gap is large, we're kind of confronted. Now, you have to remember, we're little small children as we're confronting all of this. And our first inclination is to pay most attention to others' expectations and to try to meet those expectations because we're so dependent on other people's acceptance. And over time, what can happen is we can begin to lose touch with ourself. Now, again, I'm talking about the times when we live in, when our world is requiring us to make adaptations that create a separation from our true self. And we can lose our internal compass for navigating life. And that's what I seem to see in my clinical practice, where one decision gone wrong led to another bad decision and led to a lot of tangling, like people wandering in the woods without a compass. And they start backtracking on themselves, and they create a very tangled path, and at some point are very confused. And that's what I saw in my office, in my clinical office, are people who were kind of lost and confused and how to untangle their lives. And the work on character strengths, I think, can be a powerful tool for helping people acquire, at a young age, acquire a strong internal compass to help them navigate life. Life's difficult, and it's not simple. And it really helps to have a strong internal compass to navigate life. So that's one of the reasons why I'm so passionate, because there's so much pain that seems to be unnecessary and suffering that seems to be so unnecessary. And as you can imagine, that pain and suffering finds a multitude of negative expressions in our world. Also, as a psychologist, I noticed that when I was able to shift the conversation from what was wrong to what was strong, things changed dramatically. Body language changed from being kind of slumped over and eyes looking at the ground to sitting more straight, eye contact, eyes kind of starting to sparkle as we talked about what was right and strong about the person, and then how could they build a life forward based on those strengths. So that was my personal experience. It felt like when I was trying to untangle their knots, I felt like I was kind of working with a hand tool, so to speak. And when I was able to shift the conversation to what was good and strong about them, it felt like all of a sudden I had a power tool in my hand, and they had a power tool in their hand, and things changed quickly and dramatically, and they didn't really need much help from me after that point. Also want to share another personal reflection about why this work is important to me. A few years ago, my father passed away. He was 89 years old and had been diagnosed with a terminal cancer, so he knew he was dying soon, and it was very important for him to make it to his 90th birthday. And he was very determined, and he worked real hard to make it to his 90th birthday. And by the time that day came, he wasn't able to walk very well, and so I had to wheel him in a wheelchair. And we got to his birthday party. We had assembled family members from around the country. And it was a wonderful evening. People got up and they told stories about their experience with him, and some people had presentations, and it was a great evening. And at the end of the evening, after everybody had dispersed and I was wheeling him out, I noticed kind of a wry little smile on his face, and I heard him chuckle, a little chuckle. And so I said, "Dad, what's going on? What's going on in you? What's that about?" And he said to me, he said, "Well, you know, son," he said, "I guess when it all comes down to it, what really matters is that I've been a good guy." And that's, to understand that well, it helps to understand the context of him being a very accomplished person who had a lot of achievements. So everyone outside of that room that was there that night would have known him for his accomplishments and his achievements. And he received many awards across his life for those achievements. But when it really came down to it, he said, "I guess what really matters is I'm a good guy." And that has stuck with me, and I've wondered how his life might have unfolded differently if he had had that realization, not when he was 90, but maybe when he was 9. And so those are some of the reasons why I'm so passionate about this work. It's so important, and we have so much now with the unfolding of the science over the last 10 years or so that we can offer. So what is this work that I'm talking about? Howard Gardner, who many of you know, who helped us understand how intelligence isn't monolithic, but it occurs in a variety of forms, multiple intelligences. At the time that we came out with our work, Howard said it's one of the most important initiatives in psychology of the past half century. Marty Seligman and I had hooked up and wanted to, and we thought there was an opportunity to try to bring some organization to the science of character. There were pieces and parts of science going on and people coming at it from all sorts of different points of view, and we knew that the accumulation of a body of evidence would be slow growing that way, and possibly by creating an organizational framework, it would help organize the efforts and it could cause an acceleration in the science. And so that's what we set out to do. In order to do that, we knew we needed to establish a very strong intellectual foundation. We needed to create a consensual language or a framework for understanding character, and we needed to create tools of measurement because science depends on measuring things. And on the screen here, you see that the book Character, Strengths, and Virtues, and that was published in 2004, and that kind of set forth the intellectual foundation for the work that I'll be describing to you. After an exhaustive review of really everything that had been written about what's best about human beings, from ancient times to contemporary times, from Aristotle to the Boy Scouts, from east to west, from any culture, they did an exhaustive review. Dr. Seligman and his team, headed by Chris Peterson, did an exhaustive review of the literature to try to see what was in common that everyone was talking about. And they came up with 6 categories that that are considered to be the via classification. And these categories were the broad themes that they found in their review of the literature. And then the challenge was to put some flesh on the bones of these broad concepts. And what you see next to each of these concepts, the concepts of wisdom, courage, humanity, justice, temperance, and transcendence, are the flesh to those bones of what particular character strengths are associated with each of those categories. And they created a very rigorous intellectual process for determining this. They considered, as you could imagine, hundreds of possibilities. But then they created 10 criteria, and they put all the hundreds of possibilities, they put it through a process of how well did it meet these 10 criteria to meet a elemental character strength. And they came up with these 24. And this is known as the via classification. Then we came up with measurement tools. And the via surveys measure the 24 strengths in each individual, in adults and in youth. It comes in different forms. The original adult version was in 240 items, and it now comes in shorter versions, 120 items, and even shorter ones for researchers. It rank orders the character strengths, all 24, within an individual in accordance to how strongly those character strengths are represented in you. And then along with that are a variety of reports that are offered to help people interpret the meaning of those results, to make sense of those results and have a sense of, well, what do I do with them? And 2 of them are called via pros that have to do with, that are for people who are counselors, teachers, coaches, etc., who are working with people. And then we have one for adults called the via me and one called U Decoded for Youth, that individuals can just grab themselves, look at, and work with. And so those are the measures. So what have we discovered? We've discovered that as we had set out to do, indeed it looks like these character strengths are universal, meaning they're not culture dependent, they're not gender dependent, they're not age dependent, etc., but they're universal. No matter where we seem to look in the world, they are represented and they are valued. Bob McGrath, who is here today and who spoke yesterday, has been really leading the charge in a lot of the measurement issues with the VIA surveys. And he published a study, I think a couple years ago, looking at the survey in 75 countries. So they're universal, they're measurable. Again, Bob McGrath has been doing a lot of the work to establish the scientific psychometrics for the instruments so that everybody here can count on the fact that when they take it, the results are reliable and valid. And interestingly, Bob has been doing factor analyses on the 24 strains to try to understand, is there some underlying structure that we were not yet aware of as to how these might be organizing themselves. And there does seem to be one emerging that has to do with a set of character strengths that have to do with acquiring knowledge that he calls inquisitiveness, a set of strengths that cluster together that have to do with getting along well with other people that he calls caring, and then a set of strengths that have to do with being productive and getting things done and persevering and stuff, and I can't remember what he calls that. Self-control, maybe, something like that, self-control. So we have good measurements, so that's good. And it's also good that we found out that these character strengths are learnable. So I'm forgetting his name now. He's at Colorado State, but I can't remember his name now. Did work on on looking at the heritability of these character strengths. And like a lot of psychological characteristics, it turns out that they have a heavy component of genetics, and about 50%, give or take. You know, it's not an exact science, but for a way of understanding it, a large part, maybe half, of what character strengths we have a tendency towards, and we come into this world ready to develop. About half of that can be associated with genetics, and about half of it has to do with learning. And so the good news there is that we do come into this world with a predisposition to be a certain way, and we can, but it's not fixed. We can adapt to a degree by learning. So that's good too. So they're universal, they're measurable, and they're learnable. Now the rest of the body of research that's been evolving, in my mind, can be summarized in these three categories. So it seems to me that character strengths, as we've passed it through a prism of science, it seems to have refracted, almost like white light refracts into its component elements, seems to have refracted into these three elements. One is that what I call utilitarian. In other words, they help us be productive. So different strengths are good for producing different outcomes that we consider good outcomes. So the strengths that have to do with the caring strengths, obviously help produce good relationships, and other strengths help us acquire knowledge, and some of that's very obvious, and then some of the results are less obvious, and that's the emerging science, really. But the main point here is that we are learning that when people express their character strengths, good results happen. A second refraction is the moral one, which is that a defining characteristic of character strengths is that they help elevate the individual without diminishing others. Elevate the individual without diminishing others. Further, what we've been learning through research is that there is a positive contagion. When we express character strengths, it tends to have a contagious effect on those around us, and they elevate us. A researcher named Christakis did an amazing study with his colleague Fowler, in which they looked at how happiness travels through social networks. And it was amazing how it does. If you become happier, somebody who's 2 degrees separated from you becomes happier. So it's really interesting how there's a positive contagion. And that's how character strengths, I think, contribute to the collective good. And that's really the moral component of them, is that they're good for us, but they're good for the collective as well. And then there's the identity dimension. I want to spend a little time on that because I think it has particular importance. So Seligman and Peterson, in that big fat book, you couldn't see it was a big fat book, but it was 800 or 900 pages. So it's a doorstopper. And but out of all those pages, there's only about, 3 or 4 sentences in which they tentatively introduced the idea of signature strengths. And what they said, signature strengths are the strengths of character that a person owns, celebrates, and frequently exercises. They're the strengths that come most naturally to us, and that people who know us best, they would use those to describe us. They are our psychological signature. And they are core to our personal identity. I think of it as kind of like facial features. So we all have the same facial features. We have eyes and eyebrows and mouths and noses and stuff. But it's really how they are configured on our face, and in terms of character, it's how these 24 character strengths are configured within us that determines our character. And I put the definition of character up here because I think it's really important for us all to keep in mind that character is not about how we are all the same. It is how we are distinctive from one another. It's the mental and moral qualities distinctive to an individual. So keep that in mind as I go through this today. And so these, our profile. We have 3 million people from every country on earth who have taken the VIA survey. By the way, how many of you have, by show of hands, have taken the VIA survey? Yeah, so maybe 20% or so. For the rest of you should know it's free and it's online. And it takes 15 minutes. And you'll learn things about yourself that'll change your life, but don't, no pressure or anything. Now when we apply this to young children, which is all what you guys are doing, I think the following analogy can be apt. Depending on how we look at children, and understand this is in its extreme form, we can approach children as we would approach a lump of clay, or as we might approach some seeds. Okay? And depending on how we approach them will determine how we interact with them. If we see them more as a inanimate object of clay, our tendency will be to envision what we want it to be and to go about molding it to become that vision. On the other hand, if we see a child as a living organism, of course, which a child is, then we know our role is to nurture and allow it to unfold. So with a young child's kind of like this bud at the top, hasn't yet revealed its true nature. We don't know if it's going to be a carnation, a rose, or a tulip, really, when it opens up. But we know it's a living organism, and so we need to keep our eyes out to start to see hints at what will it become? What is its nature? What is it unfolding to be? Now, if we have too strong of an expectation, this goes back to my opening comments, if our expectation is too strong of what we want it to be, if it's unfolding as a carnation, in our minds we are looking for a yellow tulip, we will start to do things to that unfolding carnation that will essentially mangle it and not nurture it. And we can do the same thing to children. As children start to unfold their nature, and if we have firm ideas in our mind, visions of what we want that child to be like, and we start to try to mold that, especially if it's at odds with their nature, we will essentially psychologically mangle children. And of course, none of us want to do that. The research on signature strengths has been coming out and showing us that essentially when we express those signature strengths of ours, good things happen. We do well, and our well-being improves. Willie Rook is one of the most prolific researchers in the world from the University of Zurich, who does a lot of work on the expression of the significance of people expressing their signature strengths. Here you see a graph of some research that he has done on students. The more that they express their signature strengths at school, the higher their satisfaction with school, the higher their positive emotions are, the better their positive relationships with their teachers are, and the higher their engagement and learning is. He has found the same thing in the workplace. And let's not forget, because oftentimes we do forget, that schools are also workplaces. They employ all of you guys, and it's your job. And so schools are workplaces, and what he has shown is that when we have the opportunity to express more of our signature strengths at work, we're more likely to consider work a calling, an expression of who we are. It's something that we look forward to doing and getting up in the morning to do, and we give of our discretionary time, and we're passionate about it, and we go above and beyond because it's a calling and it's not just a paycheck. Here's just a quick summary. I'm not going to spend time on it, but you can peruse it quickly on some of the positive results that have come out of people looking at the application of character strengths in education. A lot of good stuff, and that's the main message of this slide. There's a lot of research. I failed to mention, I think there's not in education only, but there's probably over 200 published studies in journals via character strengths. And we're coming to understand it very well. And as I told you, there's millions of people from all over the world who have taken the survey. It's translated now into, I think, close to 30 different languages, etc. So I came across a couple quotes over the years that mean a lot to me and summarize two important points. One is it's very important for us to have our lives be an expression of who we are, of our signature strengths. And I came across this quote that starts, "If you ask me what I came to do in this world, I am here to," and you can think for a moment of how you might fill it out, but Émile Zola, the French philosopher, filled it out. "If you ask me what I came to do in this world, I'm here to live out loud." And by live out loud, I take that to mean to live authentically, to not get through your life and find out that what it has been is mainly an exercise in meeting other people's expectations and molding yourself to their expectations, but really an expression of your authentic self. Your life has been an expression of who you are. Secondly, the second quote has to do with the importance of being appreciated by others for who you are. And that comes from the very famous psychologist William James, who said the deepest principle in human nature is the craving to be appreciated. And what I would add to that is not being appreciated for who you are not, but being appreciated for who you really are. These three refractions of character, I think, are a good way of organizing also how character strengths and character is being applied in the world of education. So there's the utilitarian approach, and though I have no particular knowledge about how the KIPP schools are presenting it, but I've read about it. I know they presented, I think, yesterday. And they're a big, large school system that sees very predominant, I think 87% low-income kids. And they're a large charter school system. And what they decided to do is, I think, from my understanding, is they decided what kinds of outcomes are they looking for that they want to produce with their children, and which of the 24 strengths are the most likely ones to produce those outcomes. And I think they consulted with some scientists and came up with 7. And with those 7, they teach them in the schools. And they actually have a report card, I think, in which they grade students on the progress that they're making in acquiring and expressing those strengths. I think of that as a utilitarian approach. They're trying to think of what's the practical purpose here. We're trying to create certain outcomes, and which strengths do we think are best for those outcomes. A moral approach, which is happening more so in the UK, is one in which people are trying to produce citizens, moral citizens, good citizens that are going to create a good society. It's essentially the same approach, in my mind, in which some authorities figure out what they value the most and what they think are the most important values that they want the students in their charge to acquire. And then they go about trying to train them up on those set of values and strengths. That's what I call a building up approach, and I think it's a traditional approach to character education in which it's basically a deficit-based approach, which is that kids don't have, by and large, these kids don't have enough of this, that, or the other thing, and we're going to try to fill them up and have them have more of that. So let's build up what they currently don't have. Now, the third approach that comes from the identity and well-being approach, I think, is a markedly different approach, and one that's kind of more consistent with positive psychology. Positive psychology asserts that we are all probably, it's probably more cost-effective for us all to try to understand our strengths and to build upon those strengths as opposed to remediate our weaknesses. And so the identity approach says, what are a child's strengths today? What are their signature strengths today? As they sit in my room today, they are successes of some sort. They wouldn't be sitting here if they hadn't already experienced many successes in life. And the character strengths that they already possess have been important in producing the successes that they've already experienced in their life, and to help them understand that, and then to help them go from what is likely to be unconscious competence at using those strengths to a conscious competence at using those strengths. And that's something I call building upon, because it's building upon that which is already there. So I want to give you some, in the remaining time, I want to give you examples of, and I hope I don't run out of time. There's a really, of that latter approach being done in various places. So there's a early childhood center in Kentucky called Children Inc. They service about 1,500 children a day. And they're taking an interesting approach based on understanding, based on the developing autobiographical self, understanding that young children are developing a sense of themselves, and they're developing their own personal stories, and they're going through a very deliberate process based on autobiographical self, moment-making, meaning-making, memory-making, mindset-making. And because I see I'm running a little behind, I'm not going to go into each one of those, but it's a very interesting approach to help children emerge that when they're expressing their character strengths, they end up actually incorporating that into their own personal stories and understanding themselves in terms of their character strengths so that they can carry that forward in their lives. The Thriving Learning Communities is a program for 4th, 5th, and 6th right now, middle school. And I'm a little biased because it comes out of the Mayerson Academy. And as you heard in the intro, that's a nonprofit organization I started 25 years ago to do professional development for K-12 education. And they have decided to make a concerted effort to really bring to education a best-in-class application of character strengths. It's developed by teachers and for teachers. And Jillian Darwish, I don't know if she's here today, but she is actually presenting in more detail later this afternoon, I think at 3 o'clock on this. So I think it's, again, I'm biased, but I think it's really the best case example for a formalized. The prior example are teachers who just kind of take and work with the stuff intuitively. And here, this is a very organized program that has been very well thought through and has curricular materials, etc. It's based in a social-emotional learning framework and is using the character strengths to help develop self-knowledge, self-management skills, social awareness, and relationship skills. And it uses a digital gaming platform. It has a partnership with a company called Happify. And that's such a critical element because what we know in behavior change is that it's just so hard. You introduce concepts, but what's critical to get behavior change to stick is the opportunity to practice on a regular basis. And this digital gaming platform is integrated in with curricular materials and classroom materials. And I'll give you an example of something that I was told about the other day. A teacher reported that their student, before recess was over, went to the playground monitor and asked if they could go in early. And went in early, and the teacher asked him why. And he had been getting bullied on the playground. And he wanted to go spend a few minutes with the Happify platform to kind of right his mind and soul before, so he could get back to the order of business once recess was over. There are classroom curricular materials, and they take the approach that if a teacher is going to be effective, just as the opening speaker said, if a teacher is going to be effective at helping kids know how to apply their character strengths, it's going to be best if they've experienced it personally. So where the Thriving Learning Communities program starts is with Thriving Teachers, helps teachers learn about their own character strengths and how they are important in their lives and in their teaching. Just real quickly, I'm going to run through just so there's an international flavor to all of this. There's an organization called CorStone based in the Bay Area that's doing work in Bihar, India with low-caste girls aged 12 to 16, and they, through a generous grant from the Packard Foundation, were actually able to set up a randomized controlled trial It was a program that was based on presenting health curricula that were very important for these young girls and young women in terms of basic safety around sex and transmitted diseases, and water safety and food safety, and especially sex trade, etc. And what they found, as you might expect, is improved emotional resilience and self-efficacy. Now, this is a program that's based in the VIA character strengths and helping the kids understand their signature strengths. And a really important finding they found is that the one group that got the health curriculum as always versus the one that got it contextualized within character strengths, the latter group, the learning of the content itself increased 25%. At a university level, the the Universidad Tecmilenio in Mexico is doing an unbelievably, probably the most outstanding job in the world of applying it, the character strengths throughout the entire university at an academic program. So imagine now, we can have teachers more engaged, students more engaged, transform parent-teacher conferences, have IEPs that are truly identify kids' strengths and how they can build those into their learning, having less apathy and misbehavior, greater engagement, passion, persistence. This is all what can occur when we start applying character strengths. Imagine helping students grow to be true to themselves, good to others, and engaged in learning and life. So our next step is we need to keep applying this stuff. We need to keep trying new ways of applying this in school. We need to gather data. And we need to be bold and yet cautious. And what I mean by that is it's bold to be doing anything new, and all of you know that. There's a great force that maintains inertia of status quo, and to be inserting something new is a bold thing in and of itself. But I want to encourage us to be cautious, because I think it's ultimately, in the long run, what's most important is that our practice of character strengths not outstrip our science too far. And at this point, our science is very, very young. And we're just learning stuff. We're really just at the point of learning about the individual character strengths, let alone how they work together and in groups, etc. It's kind of like having the periodic table of elements before we understood. We know what hydrogen is and oxygen, but then we learned that, well, 2 parts hydrogen and 1 part oxygen is what water is. And, we have a long way to go. And for that reason, I also like to stick to the practice that says, above all else, do no harm. And so my recommendation is to be very cautious about doing approaches that prescribe character strengths to students, because I just think it's ahead of the science. I think the more cautious approach, and it's still a bold approach, is to focus on the strengths that kids already have and to help them build upon those to make the most out of their learning and their life. And so what I have here is a picture of any person, and human beings have this broad capacity. Unfortunately, we've seen it unfold last night, this dark inner core. We have the capacity for great depravity, and on the other hand, we have this capacity for incredible grace, and that's depicted as the yellow here. We don't know much. I am not involved in the study of that black core, but I am involved in the study of the light. And I do know we can grow that light. And as we do it, because of the contagion effect, we know that it will spread to others. And through that, we know that we can, in that way, we can tip humanity towards its better nature. We can do that. It's not a dream. And schools can be agents of social change agents to make this happen. They can be agents of world benefit, starting with teachers, understanding and embracing their character strengths, taking it to the kids, through the school, to the parents, and out into the community. It can be done. You can do it. You're the only people who can do it. It's not a quick fix, but it is going to work. And it takes persistence over a long period of time. But you guys can actually change the world and make this happen. We now have the tools from character science that are powerful tools to really help us. They're new insights that we didn't have 20 years ago. So, kids around the world will be in school on Monday. And we can't sit around and wait until all the science comes out. We have to start doing things, and let's get it done. Thank you very much.